Party people, well, welcome once again to the Party of One podcast, the actual play RPG podcast where the gaming table is always set for two. I'm your host as always, Jeff Stormer, and this week on the show, I'm joined by Adam Dixon for a game of Ryne. Ryne is a wild fantasy role-playing game of community and connection in a world shaped by broken titans. Using a tailored Powered by the Apocalypse system built around emotion and change, Ryne invites you to weave stories of people living in a world in its autumn. You will journey through vibrant landscapes, inhabit communities reliant on indifferent titans, and learn the secrets of the faltering remnants. It's inspired by stories such as Earthsea, Shadow of the Colossus, Princess Mononoke, and Mushishi. It is a beautiful game about, exploring and discovery and growth and learning, and it is just a beautiful, wonderful play experience. I had such a blast with it. This game fucking rips, and I think you're really gonna love it. The game is currently crowdfunding on Indiegogo. You can find a link to that in the show notes. You can also download a free play kit at adtidi.itch.io/Ryne, or you can check the show notes for more information about all of that and more. And with all that said, let's go ahead and throw it over to me in the past so that he can get started with the show. Take it past me. Thanks, future me. This week, I am so excited to be sitting down with Adam Dixon. Adam, thank you so much for coming on Party of One.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so excited. I've been excited about this game for a very long time. I think this is going to be a ton of fun. Real quick, though, at the top of the show, why don't you take a moment to let the lovely listeners at home know about the game we're playing this week, as well as anything else that you've got going on that you might want them to know about?
Yeah, so the game we're playing is a game called Ryne. I'm one of the two co-designers. I'm working on it with another great game designer called Ryne Henderson, and it's being released under our game design co-op called Furtive Shambles. And the game Ryne is like a wild fantasy powered by the apocalypse game set in a world where big colossi kind of roam around, and they are like the shattered husks of gods, and the game focuses on like the people living in that world, like what are their lives like, what communities do they build, and all of that kind of like interesting stuff.
I love it. We've been talking about this game for a very, very long time, and I've been so excited. Like when I heard the pitch, I was in, and then I started to when you sent me over the books and I read the playbooks, the more I read, the more excited about it I got, and just it is even just the play kit that you shared with me is so evocative and has such a rich world that I've been thinking about this game for a long time, and I'm so excited to be sitting down to play it. This is gonna I'm real excited is the thing.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear it. Yeah, we've been working on it for a while, and part of the reason for that is we first made it because I also host a podcast called These Flimsy Rituals, and we originally developed the game for that. And we ran it for our first season, and then we continued doing other games, and we're doing Blades in the Dark for our second season, but all in the same world. And we'll be going back to this once in the future, once that season's done. And so we've had a lot of time to develop out that world and kind of think about it. And the big conceit is there are these titans called remnants, and they're kind of godlike. They have domains associated with them. So they shape the landscape according to those domains. So if you had a titan of grief, you might have a landscape filled with weird trees and gravestones and stuff like that. If you had a titan of preservation, maybe it's argon rivers and salt flats and tar pits and all of that stuff. So yeah, we kind of created that world, we created this game for it, and then we've just been working on it since then. And a part of the challenge of developing it now is how do we open that up to people?
Right, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
We've got this good concept, and yeah.
And I think honestly, the game has, having read through it, and we'll get to the gameplay in just a moment, but, I feel what I'm really excited about is, the game, I feel has done a good job just reading through what I've read through of, bringing me into that space, and kind of, I think it's, I'm feeling really comfortable exploring this place, which I think for a game with such a rich, sort of, baked-in world is a real kind of triumph of making like you said, I feel I'm in this space and I'm able to kind of play around in it, which I think is a really impressive thing. And I think the work that you've been doing to answer that question feels really well fleshed out.
Yeah, it's a thing of it's a baked in world, but it's a very conceptual baked in world. So it's no this town is here or anything like that. It's all this is the conceit.
Yeah,
do with that what you will.
All right. Well, then I think it's time to stop talking about the game and start playing the damn thing, frankly.
Yeah. Can I just mention the the play kit and
Oh yeah,
Kickstarter?
absolutely. Please.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. Of course. Yes.
That's okay.
Reluctantly, I will allow this. Yes.
Thank you. But yeah, we have the play kit out. You can go and grab that on our itch.io. I think the game is called Ryne, Ryne, and I think you can find it on the Furtive Shambles itch. And also playtesting it. So if you like the sound of a game and want to play it, you can come play it and tell us what you think. And we're hopefully going to be doing it sometime this year.
And in all likelihood, I'm saying this both to the listener and to you. In all likelihood, this will be out as close to the release day of said as possible, so that people can listen to the episode and go back the game. Then with that, I believe we are ready to dive in and start playing the game.
And where would you like to start? Should we start with introducing the characters we're playing and then move out from there?
I think so. I think that's the best way to go. I think we've chosen playbooks, and we'll talk through kind of the intro idea of said playbooks. We've got some questions to kind of set the story. We'll answer those once we've kind of introduced our character and sort of asked the initial questions, and then once we know our characters, we'll kind of figure out what the immediate scenario is. We'll figure out what our bond is, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, normally when you, play a game of Ryne, there are, some story seeds that we kind of use to, create the world and, the little world-building games. But I think we're just going to go into it fairly cold, right? And just start with the characters and go from there.
I think so. And then if we want to pick up a seed, if we feel like we need a little extra, we can always kind of double back.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll introduce my character first. My character is Grouse. I am playing the guide rulebook. I am... my character detail, my pronouns are he, his, and my character detail is that I am prickly. I have sharp bristles, like a porcupine, cactus, or nettle. When someone inflicts physical wear on me, I inflict one wear back. I picture... the cactus is very evocative to me. I picture, they're those very specific... I'm not picturing, there are cacti with, the long kind of needles... And then there are the cacti with, the real short, sharp, almost like rose thorns. Those are kind of what I'm visualizing in my head, is those real short, sharp, thick, kind of almost like Stegosaurus plating, right? Just these thick, heavy, a little bit, being me and recognizing that I am a parody of myself at all times. If you've ever seen a picture of Doomsday, the Superman villain, those sort of bone shard looking ones, I picture that kind of texture across my whole body.
I like it.
And as a guide, it is my job to bring people places. It is my job to help people get where they're going in our community. Obviously, the remnants having created the worlds that they've created, right? Their domains having impacted their terrain, traveling from place to place is not easy, and so my role as a guide is to help people get where they're going, help people find things, and I think Grouse, I picture as having been doing this for a very, very long time, right? Grouse is very much the old hand at this, and I think there's a sort of the vibe I get, and it's not just because his name is Grouse, but the vibe I get is a loving rudeness, or a loving, a sort of tough love energy. But I also don't think it is in the trope with Grouse that I want to avoid. I think a little bit is the reluctant mentor, right? I think Grouse genuinely does get a lot of joy out of helping people and guiding people. I just think that he's old and tired and is a little bit of a jerk. But I think, if you seek him out, he's not going to do the, I'm not interested, I'm out of the game. I think he genuinely is, enthusiastic about doing it. It's just, he has his ways, he has his methods, and he knows what works for... Grouse knows what works for Grouse, and he's going to ask you to accommodate that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So tell me about your character, and then we'll answer a couple questions, and then we'll start fleshing out our scenario.
Yeah, so I'm playing Vistral. who is part of the like Heart rulebook. So like the Heart rulebook is sort of like a storyteller or like a priest or a revolutionary, any of those kind of like archetypes where it's about like embodying a concept
Got it.
in the world.
Cool. Love it.
So in particular, like I'm having to like imagine my character there now. So yeah, in particular, like my heart embodies the concept of I'm going for like myth, so like storytelling and like the folk stories that kind of exist in this world. And I'm kind of imagining them as kind of a bit naive, and like maybe slightly young.
I love that.
Yeah, like I kind of just want to like bounce off Grouse a little bit. Like I'm probably very eager to please, but have my own ways that I want to kind of be with around people, but I haven't quite realized it.
I love that. I like that. I like that a lot. And I feel like both of those tie really nicely into the idea of being like tied to the idea of myth. Like that feels like a really good, it's that idea of like a young dreamer, right? Like that feels like that's such a good evocative kind of image that I get from Vistral as this sort of like the world is larger and more magical than you could possibly imagine, and have and that feels like a very kind of young person ideal of like to aspire to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about like what my character is like from there, like what my character's goal is, or why like I might be working with Grouse. I love the idea that I maybe, I don't know whether I'm part of an order or anything like that, or like a priest or anything, but I love the idea that I'm going to travel to Remnants because I want to hear their stories. I don't know
that's
whether
cool.
A Remnant.
That's cool.
I don't know whether they'd tell me one, because you know they're big indifferent titans, but yeah.
Well, and that's really cool, and that's I love that. I love the idea that like the idea that you have this dream that you actually don't even know if can come true, or like what it would look like to come true. That's really good, and that is something that like goalposting a little bit. I really want to explore like how Grouse interacts with that kind of ideal, because I think there's a really brilliant sort of thing built off of that. Like I think there's a like Grouse's like how Grouse has seen the world, I think is going to give him a really interesting perspective on like that kind of goal.
Yeah. In terms of like my luck and stuff, my humanity, so like the humanity in the world is like, because the world is shaped by remnants, like the people are too, is the and I've decided on that being like I've got an extra pair of arms. So yeah, which is like you have an extra pair of arms that function much the same as your other pair. You might use them to carry extra things, to give you stability while navigating shared surfaces, or just to give like really good hugs. Where are the extra pair of arms? Are they as strong as your first pair? I kind of like the idea of them being like a bit vestigial. Like they're sort of smaller, like almost like there are 3 of them kind of like down the ribcage, like slightly smaller than the rest of them.
Love it. Almost like spider-like a little bit.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, and I think I'm generally like quite tall, with like enchanting eyes, and like I wear lots of like ribbons and like soft headscarves and things like that. But I think I'm imagining that I'm fairly big, but I'm like not necessarily comfortable in it.
I like that.
Just still learning, yeah. And I'm gonna go for they/them pronouns.
Got it.
Okay.
I love it. Okay, We've got a couple questions to answer here.
Yeah.
Pick one of your home turfs. Where in this territory is it? Is it at its heart, which dominates this place? Is it at its edges, perhaps new growth or something in decline? Or on the remnant, its body is an ecosystem of its own? Which of these is most interesting to you?
I'm very interested in it being on the remnant's body. Like, I love the idea of
I think me too. I think that's the one that really jumped out at me.
Yeah. Like, for a one-shot, just having a journey where we're just traveling on roads and stuff that are just part of this Titan is really interesting to me.
Yeah, like, I feel like that's... I want to explore the terrain on this Titan, and I think that's the most direct way to do that. The next question is, what grows here unnoticed? The Furrow, who see only conquest and harvest? The remnant Orleth, who've seen harbingers of its influence? Or a new plant or animal, nameless and strangely adapted to this place? I think that all three of these are very interesting to me, and I'm trying to think which one. I think the one that's least interesting to me, unnoticed, is a new plant or animal, because I think I want. That's going to be something that I think Grouse is going to notice. I think that it's either the Furrow or the Orleth are the ones that really jump out to me. I think I'm interested in the Furrow as a kind of a threat in the background. Yeah. This idea of like this sort of like colonizing force in the background is very interesting to me, and it kind of puts our goals in an interesting place. So I think that's the one that I'm gonna go for here.
Okay.
And when you cast your eyes to the horizon, what do you see? Now, this one I know exactly the one I want to go with. I'll read all three of them, but one of them has like extremely jumped out to me. There's a mountain range or something like it, a wall that is difficult to pass, a vast expanse, an ocean, forest, or desert that stretches for miles, or another remnant, its territory unfurling beneath it, the strange zone where two remnants' influences meet. I am so interested in the idea of this being on the space where two remnants meet, because I think like getting to really build out like the kind of aesthetic world of like both of these remnants, and also how their particular domains like impact the terrain, is I think the thing that I'm maybe most excited about.
Yeah, and there's something really interesting if we're like on this remnant's body.
Yeah.
Like, is it moving into another remnant's territory? Because like that feels very interesting.
I kind of love the hearing you say that is super interesting. And what I want to propose, because thinking about this in terms of like the world and in terms of landscapes and in terms of like the remnants' influences, what if both of these remnants are both moving and they're both just like passing each other, like a ships in the night situation? And so, like, their terrain is shifting underneath them.
Yeah.
And we're in that space where they're starting to blur together. And, like, eventually the terrain that has been left behind by the remnant, I picture a little bit of that terrain. It remains, but, like, we're going to slowly watch this change from one. If you were to stay in perfectly still in one spot, which I don't think our community does because we are on the body of this remnant, I think you would eventually see the world change from one domain slowly to the other and have just like that whisper of that first domain still in place.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Because that's very cool to me.
I kind of want to pitch you on like what this journey could be just from that description.
Please, hit me.
Which is, what if you are guiding me from the back of this remnant onto the other one?
Oh, that's very cool. So I have an immediate question for you. I have an immediate question for Vistral, which is, what have, and I want to ask you this before you answer your three questions.
Yeah.
But the question that I want to ask you, what have you taken? What story has revealed itself to you? And this maybe will also. I'm gonna give you this. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm thinking through this. This is some good idle dreaming. I'm gonna throw this to you, and then I want to hear the answer to your questions while we both just kind of think on this question a little bit. Because if you're leaving this Titan and going to the other Titan, that means you've probably already gotten some kind of a story from this remnant. You've already gotten some kind of a story from it, and I'm interested to hear like how that has manifested itself to you, and if you're even aware that it has happened.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be answered right now. I'd love to hear the answer to your three questions, but like that was the kind of juicy big question that like you prompting that immediately popped into my head.
Yeah, especially if we're saying that like Vistral is, I'm imagining them as like very naive, but maybe like they've gone like slightly past that stage. Like maybe they've had like that first interaction.
That's that's a really great dynamic. That's a really great moment that I'm really interested in exploring.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to answer my questions while I think about this question.
All right.
Yeah, because it might help. My questions are, you swear loyalty to an ideal? Who does that tie you to? So my answers are like an organization, so that could be a faith, an order, an institution, an empire, a revolution. This territory, and perhaps the remnant or envoys that rule it. Or a community, though not everyone here A community, though not everyone shares the same faith in it. My concept is sacred here. And I feel like this is something I want to sort of throw back to you a little bit as well. Because I'm tempted by those last two. So, like, either having, like, a bond with, like, a remnant or an envoy in this place, or the community itself. Like, is this a community of people doing the same stuff, or am I, like, an outlier? Is an interesting question.
That's a really interesting question. I think the thing that is most interested to me is... I love the idea of it being a community. I think I'm interested in it being this community I'm interested in this community, and I guess, and the thing that interests me in that is this idea of whether or not, if your concept is somewhat sacred throughout this community, and also we live on the body of this remnant, that makes a lot of sense that, like, hearing this remnant and, like, hearing its stories would be really, like, compelling and really, like, sacred to that community.
Yeah. And it's something interesting to me, which I guess we might answer as we play, like, is it that we're on this remnant and we go out to, like, find new stories, or are we just, like, hopping between remnants?
That's really interesting, too. I kind of love that we're hopping between remnants. I almost want to posit that, like, our community is on some level, like, the sort of, like, value and sort of mission of our community, the sort of uniting factor of our community is that mission that, like, informs that has informed you of, like, we're here to, like, actually catalog the stories of these remnants.
Yeah.
That's really compelling to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to me too. And I can just imagine, because, like, obviously that's probably, like, interesting to us as, like, a community ourselves, but I can also imagine how that's interesting as we're traveling through for, like, meeting other communities, because I imagine knowledge about the remnants and how they work, or, like, hey, this remnant has gone to here, or, like, this titan is a good place to live because it embodies this, is very useful.
Yeah, and that idea that, like, I love that. The visual that I get for the community on the whole is a little bit of, like, an arts co-op, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, I picture it being a thing where, like, and this kind of makes explicit a thing that was really interesting, that, like, jumped out to me about how Grouse probably interprets, like, the story of the remnants as, like, a guide figure. I love the idea that maybe everyone is interpreting the story of the remnants in a different way, right? That there are some people who, like, are hearing the things that the remnant are, like, expressing the sort of messages of the remnants via, like, writing, but then there are people who are making paintings and sculptures and, like, and you know, things of that nature, and dances and plays and song, and, like, it's this very kind of personal interpretive thing, right? Like, there's no, like you had kind of pointed out, like, there's no real, they're not directly saying anything to you, but, like, there are ways for someone to kind of channel their own voice in unison with the remnant in a very compelling and cool way.
Yeah, and I always like that thing in this world where it's like, the remnants are big, weird gods. They're, like, inscrutable, and you can't really understand them as a human. Like, they're not, like, laying out, this is, like, what I'm about. We're just, like, interpreting them and making our best about, like, what... Oh, I think this is a remnant of preservation rather than it literally being that. And there's something nice about, like, I can just imagine in our community the amount of debates that must happen.
Oh God, yeah.
About, like, no, it means this.
No, you're really missing. You're missing the thematics.
I need to... One of the things I get as a heart is, like, a means of expression, and now I need to decide what my means of expression is. But yeah, second question. Who, upon seeing your expression, marked you as a threat? The fates create a threat to represent them. So it could be a group fundamentally opposed to my ideal, who preach rival tenets, someone who holds authority, fearing the damage I might cause them, or one of the remnant's envoys, who fears my concept sway here. Like the last one, but inverted. I like the idea of, like, instead of it being a fear about, like, me being here, I love the idea of, like, one of these envoys. So, like, envoys, if you imagine, like, folkloric creatures, like, they're creatures created by the remnant to, like, represent bits of its concept. So yeah, like the envoys are like creatures that represent a part of the remnants like concept, that they're like folkloric creatures and kind of created by the remnant itself to just kind of represent it in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be like they go and like speak to the people that live there, or they could have other purposes too. So I like the idea that like maybe one of them wants us to stay.
Yeah.
And like we're moving around in this very fleeting way, like moving between like one land and the next, and like learning all of these tales, and that must be like very short lived for like these creatures that are eternal.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of like us turning up, being like, "Oh yeah, we've learned everything that there is to like know about this," and then one of the envoys being like, "No, you don't understand. You don't understand. You've got to stay. You've got to listen more."
Yeah. Oh,
Is
that's
kind of
really
compelling.
good. That's really good, and I love that. That's really wonderful. I've got some thoughts on how that could come up in play, and like why I have a really clear thought of why the envoy is what we haven't heard, and it ties into my questions in a really fun and interesting way.
Okay, I'm interested to hear what that is. What is my particular expression that is that? That there's like one of the words that I wrote down in like the expression move when I was writing it, which is just like the phrase spirit skimming, because I wanted to see what people would come up with for like what that is. I like the idea that it's that. Like I imagine I kind of move through the world almost like one of the things we've not spoken about is like spirit is like a very real thing in the world. And like when the remnants were like kind of started breaking, they split into two. So like some of them are physical, some of them are spiritual. It's like some of them are like fogs and ghosts and like things like that. And like people have spirit too, and it's like kind of like threads of spirit that like net the world. And I love the idea that I kind of go around like collecting bits of that and like creating almost like dances and artworks using that.
For sure. Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, my last question is, do I belong in this place? And I'm just instantly going to answer, no, this place will never be my home.
Love it. Which brings us to the
Because I
question
like
of
that.
what our territory's emotion is.
Yeah. Yeah, so like when we think about like the territory and the domain, we also think about like what the emotion is, because like in this game we roll with emotions, so we've like chosen some emotions to like represent our characters. So my emotions are like hopeful and lost, and I also get like myth as like one of my emotions, being like my founding concept. What emotions did you have?
I have wise, practical, and tired, and then I also have fabric.
Yes, so like fabric is like the catch-all, basically.
Yeah.
So you say how you're feeling, you roll with whichever emotion, but if it doesn't match up with like a named emotion, you roll with fabric.
Got it. Yeah, so I've got wise, practical, and tired.
Yeah. And then we also start with like the territory's emotion as well. So like we're in this place, like that emotion is going to come up. Do you have any thoughts here? Like what is this remnant like that we're traveling on?
So I kind of want to, I think I know how I want to find this, because I've got on one of my moves is that I have a home terrain, and when I'm in my home terrain, I know the provenance of each species of flora and fauna, and we never become lost. So I think what I want to do for our starting territory is like pick maybe 2 terrains, and then kind of just you and I kind of decide what emotion we think is tied to that, like those sorts of terrains and visuals.
That sounds cool. So yeah, you have like a couple of like example ones, but you can also make one up if you've got other ideas in your head.
So salt-crusted tundra immediately jumps out to me as a phrase, especially kind of, I picture it tying nicely in with my humanity and sort of being sort of prickly. I love the idea that it is this, that same sort of like of sharpness is on a lot of this, like these kind of like salt outcroppings. That's very cool to me. And the thing that you had said that really jumped out to me that I want to integrate in some way, when you were describing these worlds, you had said like a remnant of sorrow might literally drop gravestones, and the idea of like naturally forming structures, but I haven't decided what I want that structure to be, and I got to think about this. Honestly, I just keep thinking about metal obelisks, and like that is very cool to me.
Yeah, I like that as well.
It's very just like strange metal obelisks of like varying sizes. Some of them are so large that like You could build an entire community on them. They face in different directions. They're not all perfectly upright. Some of them are jutting out of the ground, but it looks as though you're playing a video game and some of the textures haven't loaded, and there's just these very geometric shapes that just appear in the ground. Like, it's just there are just these blocks, these sort of abnormal looking blocks that just jut out of places.
I love it. And like, one of your answers was that one of your home terrains was the remnant's body itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is... Which is the remnant made out of? Is it like a salt-crusted tundra, or is it made out of these metal obelisks?
Oh, I think it's made out of the obelisks. That just feels... And because I love the idea that this space was the tundra and these obelisks just started emerging.
And I just, like... Do we have a picture of what the remnant looks like? Do you have an idea? Like, is it fractally, or is it something else?
I love the idea of it being fractally. I specifically love the idea that it looks like... fractally in the sense that you look at it, and like, if you've ever watched a video of like a fractal set where they like map it out on a graph and like you zoom in and it's just the same, and you kind of watch it sort of like loop on itself. That's the vibe that I get. Like, when you naturally stare at it, it feels like you're watching it loop. It's of this like strange, like not quite possible geometric shape.
Yeah.
And as you watch it, it feels like you watch it zoom in every time you lock eyes on the core of its being.
The other image I've sort of got in my head is also like iron filings as well.
Yeah.
When you put like a magnet under those and they just kind of erupt. Like, that's how I kind of imagine it.
Yep.
Sort of
I love that.
Coming out of the ground. And then it's just like constantly, like iron filings, but constantly moving in weird ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're on top of that, which is going to be interesting.
I love that also because like it feels almost like to be properly on top of that is to be almost like walking on a cloud a little bit. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And like finding these little the visual of jumping from space to space on these what feel like fragments that like float around this like almost like jumping around atoms around a molecule is very kind of cool as hell to me.
Yeah.
Except some of them are the size of entire islands, and some of them are barely large enough to stand on. And it's like there's I picture a lot of jumping, and that's cool.
Yeah. Are there any like, because I know you've got the thing which is about like flora and fauna, and maybe we will just find this out as we play and stuff. But like, is there any like flora and fauna that you think lives on here, or should we leave that as a?
The one thing I want to say, I'm going to say the answer. I don't know it yet, and I think we'll get there. Answer is unabashedly yes. Like, there's absolutely flora and fauna that live on these shards, these floating bits. But I think I need to see them in play before we find out what they are.
Yeah. Your question to me, which we had, was about like, what did we see?
Mm-hmm.
What did Vistral see from the Remnant, and like what story did they hear?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the story is yet, but I love the idea that for a moment they managed to like hold these like moving bits in like a pattern, like in place. And maybe the envoy that wants to keep me here like saw me doing that, and like I just love the image of them being in the center of this, miles long torrent of like moving metal fractals, and there's just like this perfect stillness around them as they're doing like their spirit skimming. Like, that's the image that's in my head.
That's wonderful. That's very cool. I love that. I love that. And honestly, like, I love that. Like, I think as far as Grouse knows, it it is only that sense of stillness is all that you've gotten from it, and maybe there's more that Visceral can share later, but like as far as Grouse knows, like all you've gotten is that sense of stillness, right? Like
Yeah.
which feels itself kind of impossible.
So what do we think the territory's emotion is?
I'm gonna go ahead.
I was going to say, is it somehow like the opposite of that, or?
I think it's got to be the opposite of that. It's got to be tied to movement and chaos and energy,
Restlessness.
Honestly, it might be. I think restless. I think it's restlessness feels perfect.
Yeah. I'm going to type restless in there and just.
That's what I'm doing as well.
Yeah. And we start at different levels depending on like what we answered for our questions. And because I said no, this place will never be my home. I start with that at -1,
which is really interesting. What's really interesting about that in relation to both of our characters is I feel like it immediately puts our characters slightly at odd with, like, it changes. I know it changes Grouse in a very tangible way.
Mm.
And I feel like it might also change Visceral in that, like, that means Grouse has a restlessness of +2, which really fundamentally, like, which puts into focus, like, what Grouse does and, like, why he does it in a really fun and interesting way, which is, like, I had said I didn't want him to be kind of the reluctant mentor figure. I almost feel like he is kind of the opposite, where, like, he's always looking for something to do.
Mm.
Like there's always someone who needs something. There's always someone that needs a guide, and like if someone isn't coming to him, he's going to other people.
Yeah.
And being Grouse, like being tired, I think that like he doesn't come out and outright say it like, I want to help you with this. I think he's just very, if you ask him, he is very much the kind of guy who, if you ask him for something, like if you ask him how to do something, he'll just offer to do it himself.
Yeah.
It's very, I'll just take care of it. It's not a problem. I got this. And secretly, he's just so excited to be doing a thing.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me that like Visceral is so low on that, and like what that means for them, like considering that they want to leave this place, or like seem to, or like the community wants to leave this place. Maybe they're just bound by that, but there's something interesting about them almost being the antithesis of this remnant, but somehow being able to communicate with it is just fascinating to me.
And so, last but not least, before we play out a few scenes, is we've got some bonds.
Yeah. So like normally, like you'd start with like a bunch of bonds with like different people. I think you can start with like 3 bonds. And some of those you get through like the answers to the questions you do. But I think we should definitely just create a bond with each other.
Yeah.
And we'll have that to play with. And if we feel like there's one that comes up as we play, we can always create that there and then. So bonds in this have like, you choose the person who you have a bond with. You choose an emotion to represent like how you feel towards that person, and then you also like write a statement which is like gives that more context or like a little bit more sharpness in play. So yeah, I'm just gonna think my through. So your name is Grouse, and the emotion that you choose like doesn't have to be an emotion that's named on your sheet. It can be any emotion you like. I'm just trying to think like, what is my feeling towards you? Do you have an idea of like how you feel towards Visceral?
One of the bonds on my sheet is very interesting, and I feel like fits Visceral really well. Which is Visceral longs to join me on my travels, and perhaps finally they're ready.
Okay, yeah.
I that feels, I really like that. I really like that sense of. And it also like plays really nicely off of the experience that like you've kind of just had, of you just like really experienced kind of like what the maybe the remnants, like what it's actually like to interact with a remnant, and in my mind, like, that's what it really took to finally, like, to make you to make me see you as someone that, like, I can take on a journey, or take on an expedition, or on a mission, or like on a job, is like you understood so much of, like, the magic and the spirits and all these things, but the one piece of the puzzle that I felt you were missing was, like, you hadn't really, like, you had studied it but not really experienced it, and this was the first time maybe experiencing it.
Yeah. And I think my bond back to you, I'm going to play on, like, a very similar thing, which is, I'm going to go for, like, the emotion hopeful. And I'm going to go for Grouse listens intently to my performances. I will nature that curiosity. Or, like, I guess instead of listens will be watches, but, like, I love the idea that Grouse is fascinated by, like, the spirit skimming that I do. I don't know whether that's true or not, but, like, at least from, like, Vistral's perspective, like, Grouse seems interested in them, and I think Vistral's kind of just a little bit hopeful that means something more.
I'm putting down encouraging for my emotion. I think I see this as, like, I see you as having tremendous, immense potential.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I think that I want to kind of push you to be the you that I think you have the potential to be.
I like that, yeah.
I've seen so many people. I've done so many jobs, I've worked with so many storytellers and artists and all these things, and I look at you and I'm like, you have such profound potential that I want to help you realize it.
That sounds good. I like that. I like that this is just, like, a very, almost like feeling each other out kind of relationship.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so your bonds also start at, like, normal. So, like, basically, like, there are some, what we're calling stitches in this game, which, like, track different things, a bit like clocks. And so you start with, like, 2 of the 3 of those filled in, and, like, that can change over time. Like, that can go up and down. And I will say that I do start with, like, an extra bond that is defined, which is I start with a bond with my concepts. I start with a bond with myth, which I've chosen as trusting. Like, I trust in that.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. My statement is I serve the old stories and they serve me. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that, like, plays out as we play a little bit.
And with that, do we want to set a scene and play out some story?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So what is the first? I think what I want is to say, if I am taking you through to this other remnant,
yeah,
and that's going to mean navigating from, like, our terrain to another space. I kind of want to. I want to ask you a question. I want to do kind of the opposite of how we fleshed out, like, our current remnants, like, terrain and domain. I want to flesh out, go the opposite of that, and ask you, what is the first, just, like, top of your head, the first emotion, instinct, vibe? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Like, what is the first thing that pops into your head?
I'm trying to remember what the word is for it, but, like, I guess, like, scrappiness. So I'm looking, like, I've got a board, like, ahead of me with, like, a load of, like, postcards and stuff on, and I can see, like, one of those postcards is, like, a load of birds. And do you know, like, when birds are fighting over, like, seeds?
Yeah.
And they're, like, hopping around and, like, kind of having that, like little squabbly moment where it's not serious, but, like, it's that emotion.
Almost like
that perkiness, almost.
Moxie.
Yeah. Moxie, yeah.
Oh god, that a remnant of Moxie is so freaking cool. Like, I'm immediately... So yeah, I think I am taking you... I think, like, we are... Our community, we've been studying our remnant for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, our remnants, I think there are segments of our community that don't see that work as done yet.
Yeah.
Which is partially why you're kind of going off on your own a little bit here.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So I think, like, I am taking you to, like, see this remnant for the first time. which
Are you a
means...
part? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I was going to ask, are you a part of our community? And like, I guess what I mean by that, especially if you've been in here a while, like maybe you are by like de facto, but have you always been a part, or is it like we rocked up here one day?
I love... A very classic Jeff Stormer answer is a little bit of both.
Mm.
And I think my answer here is yes and no. I am a part of the community, but I don't share the community's purpose.
Yeah.
Like, I am a part of the community in a very utilitarian sense, in a very, like local sense. Like, I travel with you wherever the community goes, like, I go with you. Like, I am part of the community in that sense, and I'm part of the community in that, like, I live in the community, I help the members of the community, but, like, I am not tied to the community at all in terms of helping. Like, it's, like, my mission, my purpose, I have no particular interest in, like, studying and interpreting the stories of the remnants. Like, I am here because I am in this community because, like, I think at one point, whether it's been recently or a long time ago, we crossed paths, and I had a skill set. I brought things to the table. Like, I was useful, and I am someone that likes feeling useful, right? Like, I am someone that likes feeling useful. I am someone that likes having a purpose and likes helping people.
Yeah.
And I found that this was a community that often needed someone to guide people through things. And that's something that I am good at. And so I have been doing that with the community for a very long time.
I like that. And so, like, are we joining this at the moment where we're going to go see this new remnant?
I think so. I think I love... I the one question I want to ask to set this up a little bit is, like, how did you ask Grouse to guide you here? Was this sort of a mundane ask? Was this something that you kind of approached Grouse in secret? Was this something that like you've talked openly about for a long time? Like, what do you picture as sort of the moment that you approach Grouse and say, like, we need to go and see this?
Yeah. I'm looking back at, like, my restless stat and it being so bad. And having one of the interesting things about, like, emotions in the system is, like, it's not about, like, how much you feel that thing or, like, or anything like that. It's like how well does it go when you feel that thing? Like, how comfortable are you in that? How, like, controlled are you when you do that?
Got it. Yeah.
And I just love the idea of being like, maybe I am very restless. Like, maybe I'm more restless than everyone else in my community, but, like, that's the thing that
what
gets
you
me
into trouble. Yeah, that's great. That's really, really good.
So I love the idea that when I was growing up and, like, while I was, like, probably, like, apprenticing and, like, learning this trade that I've got and, like, learning how to commune with remnants and, like, interpret them and all of that stuff that our community does, like, we were moving around a lot and we were going to a lot of different places. But I love the idea that we've been here for a few years. And maybe it's, like, a slow process. Like, maybe over, like, the last few weeks, like, when we're sat around, like, one night, you know, having some food or, like, having some drinks or something like that, like, just approaching you and asking you for stories about other places. And I think that kind of impetus kind of grows over time. Like, maybe I share a little bit about, like, what happened with the remnant and, like, the stillness that we found there, but, like, there's also, like, you can sense that I'm sort of, like, deeply bored. And, like, I'm there, like, I'm asking you about other stuff because I want to see other stuff. Like, you maybe ask me for more details about, like, what did the remnant tell you and all of that stuff, and I just change the subject all of the time. Like, this wondrous thing has happened to me, but I'm not interested in it.
I love it. And I love that being far more in control of my restlessness. I love that I'm kind of the worst possible influence for you in this moment, where, like, I think I very quickly pick up on that, and, like, I think that's almost why we jump in right in that moment of us all already kind of, like, mid-embark, because, like, there's not some, like, neither of us have to kind of convince the other, because, like, I pick up that you're bored and I'm always bored, and so there's just, it's very much a snowball of, like, we're kind of on the road before we even fully kind of have pieced together what's happening.
Yeah. I kind of, like, I'd love to ask, what is Grouse's idea of what is happening when you're taking me to see this remnant? Like, what is Grouse's hope here? Is it just like, you're going to show me this thing and then we're going to go back?
I kind of think that is the case.
Okay.
Because I kind of think it is really, I think that Grouse is approaching this. This is very much not doing someone a favor, which is how Grouse approaches most of his work. This is very much in the space of, hey, you want to go see something cool? Yeah. And, like, sneaking off to go see something cool.
And I think the first thing you notice, or, like, you've noticed as, like, we're walking, probably, like, hopping between, like, these different shifting bits of this remnant, is Vistral is carrying a lot of stuff. Like, one of my gear things that I've got is pockets filled with absolutely useless things. And I'm just imagining that I've got a backpack that looks slightly too heavy, and I've got, like, pockets with bits of, like, scrolls and stuff like that in, and, like, blank paper, and I'm carrying a lot of stuff. And I think you easily pick up on, like, oh, Vistral isn't intending to come back.
I love that. I love that a lot, and I think, like, I'm grappling with that, but I'm also kind of, I'm gonna ask actually for a move right now. Because I think I want to be able to kind of probe Vistral's mind a little bit, right? Like, or rather, or I want to call for the read a person move, because I think I'm trying to understand why Vistral is leaving, right? Or, like, what you're looking for, what you're looking to get out of leaving. I think I'm looking to see what you're getting out of leaving.
Yeah. Cool. So when you read a person's mood, intent, and reaction, say what you're paying attention to, and then roll. So what are you paying attention to of me?
I think I'm paying attention to what you're carrying and to what you're saying, as we are both kind of talking about, like, what we're seeing on this remnant and what we're seeing in this space, which I will ask you, I will throw this to you after I make this move to give me some visuals, or maybe I will throw in some as well, but, like, as we're talking about, like, the changing landscapes and we're kind of hopping and talking about these remnants and talking about these stories that we've heard and all this stuff, I'm paying attention to what you're saying and to, like, the tone with which you're saying it, to just kind of understand, like, I know what I'm doing here is just, like, taking you to see something cool. I'm trying to really, truly understand, like, beyond just you're not leaving, like, what is it you're trying to get out of this?
Yeah. That makes sense to me. The one, like, image I have of what this place is like, we're talking about, like, restlessness. Like, I was trying to work out, like, what is the weather like right now? And we're talking about restlessness, and my mind instantly goes to, like, thunderstorms.
And my mind went to the same place for Moxie, and it's I think it's really interesting. I think those two together, what I get is, like, I forget the term for, like, when it's a thunderstorm, but it's, like, from the heat, like a dry thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Where it's dry, it's just like a dry, hot wind, and it's just thunder cracking, right? Like, that feels very, like, that feels very restless, but also with sort of a sort of defiance to it, is like no rain, no water, no nothing, just the rage of thunder in the air.
And we are on this, like, miles-long Titan made of metal.
Yeah.
And I just imagine, all I'm imagining is, like slightly differently coloured thunder, like, maybe, like, greenish-blue, just hitting the high points of this and just dissipating through its body.
Oh, see, the visual that I get, I think the thing that we see is, like, a lightning bolt hits a piece of it, and it being metal, like, it almost reflects off of it.
Ooh.
So you kind of see, like, instead of it just cracking in one place, it kind of pinballs between, like, a ton of these different, like, metal obelisk structures.
Yeah.
So you watch a lightning bolt just, like, ping, 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 and like bounce around all of these spaces. And like each time a lightning bolt hits, you kind of watch it go from place to place, and you kind of have to like duck your head just to like, because you're not 100% sure if it's going to come towards the one that you're standing on.
How have we been living here for 3 years?
I think I think it's a level of there's a level of learned caution.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's one of my like it's a thing that I genuinely love about like when you live in a place for long enough and you just know that the little things. In the same way that, like, if you live in a house and it's like, you gotta turn the hot water on the shower, you gotta turn it all the way up, but then turn it right down because it's not gonna get hot unless you turn it all the way up. And then you gotta turn it down you gotta turn it down immediately because it's gonna get steaming hot. You cannot step in that shower until, like, it's those ways that, like, we've been living here just like, so like, there are things that if someone were to look at this from the outside would go, what the hell are you doing? And it's like, well, because that lightning bolt's going to come down, and like, we have like a whole process of just like, we've learned the rhythms.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't want to be at the points that are highest.
Yeah.
Like, always moving to like the lower parts of its body is kind of interesting.
I love it.
Okay, so reading a person then. So the question I'm going to ask is, how is Grouse feeling?
Grouse is feeling... My gut says... could I, like, does encouraging come into play here? Because that's, like, my first instinct, or maybe wise. Those are my two instincts.
Yeah, so you can choose either of those. If you choose encouraging because you don't have that as like a named emotion, you just roll with fabric.
Okay, I'm gonna roll with encouraging because I think that my goal here is really like, I like helping people, and like I see this as, I thought that what you wanted was just seeing something cool, but I see something much broader in that, and so I want to help you. I want to know what you need so I can maybe help you find it. It didn't work though because I did roll a 6.
Cool. And the other thing to watch out for is like if you roll a double.
I did not roll a double.
Okay.
I rolled a 4 and a 2, but yeah, I rolled a 6. So on a miss, I will ask one from the above. The fates will ask one back, and I must answer truthfully.
I mean, that sounds like the best possible answer here.
It does.
Right?
It does. I'm gonna ask straight up. What are your intentions? Because I think that's the question that I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Vistral is fully intending to run away. I think you're like watching me and like talking to me, and like you just get like a sense of almost like absence, right? I'm having a conversation just purely through. I'm just having a conversation without paying attention to that conversation. I'm just doing it.
Yeah.
And like you watch as like one of these like bolts of like the lightning strikes down like not too far away from us, but like not close enough to be dangerous. And I just barely react to it. The entire time, like my eyes are just locked on like, I'd say horizon, but like the horizon of the remnant's body.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking, you can just tell that I'm looking for a glimpse of this remnant, and I think of like the new remnant. We should have named these, that might have helped, but oh well. But yeah, I'm looking for a glimpse of like this new remnant, and just, especially with like all of the stuff I'm carrying, you just get the sense my intent isn't to come back. Like I'm intended to jump across and just go.
Mm-hmm.
At least for a little while. I guess
I love that. Okay, so ask me. I have the fates must ask me a question back.
Yeah, I think the thing that I like is the question like, what do they want from me? So like, what do you want from Vistral? Not Vistral.
What do I want from Vistral? I want you to find your purpose. I want you to. I want Vistral to crystallize this sense, this dreaming that they have into a purpose. I want them to be able to not just want a thing, but to want a thing and have a plan to get it.
Yeah.
And if that, and if they can find that here, if they can't find that in our current community, then so be it. But I want them to, I want them to be able to seize their full potential, and knowing that that like where they are now, or where they've been, where they have this overwhelming desire. I want them to push that further into a space where they can become something greater, and they can want something enough that they lock in and chase after it, as opposed to merely wanting something in the air.
And do you think that, like, this current intent that I have, like, this current plan is going to achieve that?
I hope it does, and I fear that it won't. I hope it does, and I think that there's a real potential for it too. I just hope that it does not disappoint you, because I fear that if it disappoints you, that it's going to crush that dream and that desire and that want, and it's going to move away from that.
Yeah. Sounds like there's like a lot resting in your hands.
Yeah, I think there really is.
But like in a way that it shouldn't really be. Is that nice thing that I like about Grouse as a character so far, is like, does Grouse need to care about this? Probably not, but he is.
Yeah, very much so. Like I don't have, like, I don't need, this is something that I am choosing to care too much about.
One of the questions I've got actually is, you do have like a companion listed on your sheet, which is, I think you've got like an animal, right?
Yeah.
Is that animal with us?
I think it is. I picture it being a giant grasshopper with big giant saddlebags. Its name is Harumph. And it is a giant grasshopper with saddlebags. And its skills are wagon pulling. It pulls a little wagon behind it. And also I gave it bull rushing. I picture this as just an old, stubborn, cranky grasshopper that is real good at, like, it's got kind of a little bit of a sleigh behind it. Like maybe it's like 3 or 4 sleighs that have been kind of like tied together, and it like carries them along. And also, it's real good at just jumping in a straight line, which is real useful for where we live. And also, like, it can just jump, kind of battering ram into a thing. Like, I picture, if you ask me about Harumph, I'm like, I don't tell him what to do. I sort of just tell him where to go, and he figures out the rest. And like, it's like my directing Harumph is like, I kind of like slap it on the back, and I'm like, let's go. We're going that way. And you just watch this grasshopper pulling a sleigh just jump. Yeah. And sometimes it jumps through a thing, right? Like, sometimes it makes the call of like, oh, that thing needs to get knocked over.
I love the idea of like there being little like bits of fabric that work as like parachutes for the sleighs as it like falls down.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so like this grasshopper is just probably taking a different path around us, just occasionally jumping ahead of us.
Yeah, I think as we're doing this, I think I'm watching you get ready to leave, and I think there's the moment that I'm most excited about. And I'm gonna ask us both for some terrain, and then I'm gonna ask you to make a move.
Okay.
Because this might be a game where we only make 2 moves, but I feel like we've done so much wonderful world building that I think it's honestly for the best.
No, that's fine.
I'm curious about what the moment is like when we fully make the shift from I'm gonna call our remnant restlessness. We make the shift from restlessness to moxie. What that looks like. Like, yeah. What is the first space that we find? What is the first space we find ourselves in when we are fully immersed in the terrain of moxie?
Yeah. So I had like this wonderful moment yesterday where I saw some friends that I've not seen for ages, and we have just adopted a dog, and they adopted a dog like a couple of years ago. and we introduced them, and we've got like we went for a walk, and then we took them back, and they were in our garden, which is pretty small, and they were like playing with each other, and like almost like full on like patting each other with like their paws and wrestling. And imagine if like two geological forces were doing that. Like I imagine that's what this liminal space looks like.
So the structures that I get on that are I get geysers. The idea, like the sense of like water and land are like fighting and like battling it out. I get geysers, and I get like I get sort of the only way I can describe it is like air jets, like places where like the land kind of bursts forth in like a little mini like tornado, like a heat jet, like pops out of the earth, and like I'm picturing a lot of like of spaces where things happen, right? Like caves sort of naturally form and collapse, and you kind of see it happen in real time.
Yeah.
These are the kind of spaces that I imagine us being in at this moment.
Yeah, and I sort of love the idea of, like, we spoke about, like, the remnants either being physical or, like, spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea that, like, the one we're on is definitely, like, physical, I think, like, the form of it. And I love the idea of this other one just being this big, like, burrowing ghost, almost.
Yeah.
So, like, all of the stuff that's happening is because it's there and it's creating this effect, but that's not the body of it itself.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to work out, like, in between those cracks, as, like, these, like, maybe the gusts of air are part of the remnant. Like, what lets us know that it's, like, there is something there that is a remnant? It's, like, this big spirit shape or form underneath the earth. Do we see glimpses of that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We definitely do. You can see it in the... Because, like, the thing about it, like, a jet or a geyser is it's going to leave a hole. And, like, the holes, as part of this visual of, like, the world collapsing on itself, is, like, those holes get sealed up quickly. But I'm going to ask you, what happens when you look, what do you, like, you see a glimpse of this thing under the ground that is, like, a remnant, and you have a moment. Because I think I want to call for a moment from Grouse, and then I want to throw a moment to you and say, like, what is the moment between you and this remnant? Like, when you get, like, a really clear glimpse of it at the bottom of, like, this seemingly bottomless hole.
Yeah. I think, like, I'm imagining what this looks like as I'm, like, I'm almost imagining myself, like, holding on to, like, one of these bits of, like, metal that has sprung from the earth and is kind of, like, still dancing and twisting beneath my hand. And I'm, like, leaning out over, looking down as this thing sort of, like, rolls forward and all of these geysers and, like, jets come out and then roll back. Like, in, like, that kind of scrappy, playful way. And you can see these bits coming out. I think, like, a chasm opens. And I look down and it's almost like layered patterns over each other. Like, almost, like, miles deep. As far as I can see, it's just, like, almost like snowflakey forms kind of forming over each other, but, like, translucent.
Yeah. I love that.
And
that's beautiful.
I think maybe the thing that, like, is here for Visceral, and, like, maybe Visceral, like, turns to Grouse a little bit here and it's like, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a... Can I still climb it?
I think Grouse, like, leans forward a little bit and, like, is like, well, maybe not, but I'm certain you can skim it. They're not always going to be something easy that you walk across and that you set up a camp on and that you live on for a couple years. This ain't exactly the second remnant that I've seen. This ain't exactly the... I've seen a lot of them, and they're all different, and you gotta kind of learn to speak their language. They're not gonna meet you on your terms. You have to meet them on their terms.
Take me down. I want you to take me down. And I think I'm, like, making a move here.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is demand action, which is like a bond move.
Yeah.
Which is when you demand action from someone you have a bond with, say what you want them to do and what they risk if they refuse. And I pick one for like each like mark in our bond.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got 2, so I get to pick 2 of these. The options are they either risk their reputation, your faith and trust in them, your retribution, or a further debt.
Mm.
And I think the ones that make sense to me here are like definitely your faith and trust, which is like we'll have to weaken our bond if you refuse me. And I think a further debt. Like, I was looking at the other ones, and that's the one that makes sense. Like, the idea that if you won't take me this time, I will absolutely expect you to take me next time.
And I think I'm going to do what you ask and strengthen my bond with you.
Okay.
I think that's exactly what happens. So I think I'm going to immediately make a move as well. I'm going to lead you through danger.
Cool. That sounds good. So what is the danger? Or do you want me to set that up?
The danger here is... I think the danger here is twofold.
Mm.
I think the danger here is... One is the natural terrain of this, like finding ways down, like caves are going to be collapsing and like the ground is going to be opening up into like crevasses of sand, and it's going to be like profoundly dangerous to get down there.
Yep.
And then the other danger that I really want to throw out, I love the idea of having this visual in the background is, let me look at the name just to remind myself. I think there's a momentary flashback. There's a momentary flashback to an interaction that I had a few days ago, before we embarked on this, a few days ago, with the Envoy of Restlessness. What do you think the Envoy of Restlessness looks like?
Yeah, like especially the one that's interested in me.
Yeah.
The image I have in my head is, do you know when you have like a cartoon and like you have like something like a shadow or like usually a bad guy that's interested in like someone in the story and they're kind of like just circling round in like this very extended way.
Yeah.
I sort of love that idea, like this sort of like swirling form, maybe sort of skittering, that just kind of like bounds between like these like moving bits of metal.
Playing off of the fractal nature of it, I think it is a swirling bunch of like iron fragments, or I think it is like a smaller cloud that looks like our larger cloud that we've been walking on.
Yeah.
Is sort of swirling. I think there's a moment like where like I have been made aware that I think this envoy like made me aware of the furrow and was like, you need to understand, like you need like this community is not done studying restlessness, and the only way that you can truly know how to protect it is by understanding it.
Yeah.
Like the furrow is coming.
Yes.
And if we embark on this journey, like there's a genuine threat that we will be seen, and we will be forced, we'll lead the furrow, we'll lead this conquering force, we'll lead this colonizing force to this natural entity that we don't have any knowledge about, like that like by learning about these things, like it serves a real purpose. There is a communion that happens between Remnant and Studier, where like we learn things, we learn how to connect with this thing, which means we learn how to protect this thing, and we learn like what needs to be protected versus how it can protect itself. We might be leading ourselves directly into a space where we don't have that freedom. We don't have that option.
Are we leading the furrow into like the next place?
I think we might be. I think that's the danger, is like if we are sodded, if we're not careful. I think it's in the back of my mind of like, if we're not careful, we could lead a very bad presence into a place that could cause a tremendous amount of harm.
I love the idea, because like I was trying in my mind to be like, okay, like the furrow is here, and I love the idea of this envoy wanting me to stay, but I don't want that to be like, you are chosen to do like protect this, like you are going to fix this. Like I think it's a community level thing. I think it is like it is a union between community and Remnant of like collectively this thing must be protected. Yeah. And I also just like the idea, like there's lots of stuff around, they want to, I've been like looking after some like tadpoles recently, because like one of the local ponds just dries out every year, and I was like, right, I'll just take like a small amount and raise them into frogs and put them back. And one of the things you have to do is like put them back to the same pond so that like any like plants and stuff that shouldn't be there aren't going to spread to like other watercourses. And I just love it being that. Like the furrow is, if we move, the furrow is going to follow us. And like, maybe that's why this community has been here for so long, when they normally move so much faster. It's because people in the community know that.
I love that. And the envoy has, that also means the envoy has communicated that to us, which probably means that this is a much longer relationship to grouse. Like, I've been told this many times, like, you've got to be careful. Like, there is a thing watching, there is a presence watching you that is waiting. And as long as you're here, you're safe and you can do the things to help be protected. But like, if you move, like, there's a real danger. And so I'm kind of knowingly like weighing those risks and still choosing to kind of lead you through this.
That's really interesting.
And I think the emotion that I'm feeling here is practical, right? Like, I think it is very, I know this is my comfort zone. This is what I do. This is my job.
Okay.
So the tips that I have here, even if the terrain doesn't make sense, these are things that I know. Yeah. I know what to look for. So I'm going to roll +2. And that is somehow still a 6.
Oh, God. Yeah, so when you lead people through danger, whether yourself or others, you roll, and on a miss, the fates choose. You fail to overcome the danger, and they make a move as hard as they like, or escaping it is costly, and they choose as many as they like from the 7 to 9 list. I'm trying to work out like what we want to, because there's obviously a lot of danger inherent in just like moving between these spaces, and I'm just like wary of time.
I think this will be a good cliffhanger. I think I think we can set up like a really compelling cliffhanger here of like, I think that maybe we get there.
I like the idea of just Visceral getting there.
I do too. That's exactly where my head was going.
Yeah. Like, I love the image. How are you leading us through danger? Like, I imagine this is a drop, right? Like, there's this metal shape, and it probably slopes a little bit, but then it gets very sheer.
It's a lot. Like, I think it's a lot of drops. It's like a series of drop downs, right? Like, it's kind of like dropping down. If you've there's a Nintendo game, an NES game, Battletoads has a level of which it is literally like all downward, where you just are going down like a canyon, and then that's kind of what I picture. Is like you kind of have to drop from platform to platform and like rappel yourself down a little bit. Yeah.
And all the while, there's like this shifting tide of geology just crashing into it as well. And and is the envoy following us just down the side of its remnant?
I think partway through, I realized that no, but I think why I don't make it is I realize that the furrow, like I see it, and I think the furrow is like, the visual that I get is like constructing. Picture like naturally forming beams, like steel beams between surfaces.
Oh, yeah, I thought you said beams for a moment and was like, okay.
Interesting direction.
Beams, yeah.
Yeah,
no,
like steel,
beams,
like steel,
yeah,
like
metal.
steel rods, right? Like, like imagine like the frame of a skyscraper is slowly forming, and like that's the furrow.
Like coming up the side of this remnant, like scaffolding?
Or like coming down behind us. Like it has found us and is coming down, and there's a moment where I see this, and I look at you, and I'm like, you gotta go. You gotta go, kid.
I don't think I hear you. I think my eyes are just so focused onwards that I've not seen the danger.
That's a beautiful closing moment of like, that means that I got what I want in the most tragic way possible. Like, I'm watching you go off and do the thing that you're meant to do, and I'm watching you realize your potential and realize like what I see as what you could be, and I'm like, I can't go with you. If I go with you, like, I can go with you, or I can try to lead this force somewhere else, which means that, like, in this moment, you're going to get to the bottom of this cave, and I'm not going to be there.
Yeah, I think there is a cave, maybe, like, halfway up the side of this remnant that is just kind of, like, swept here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like jump down, like grasping on some of like the branches that surround it, like the entrance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's at this moment as like my feet crunch against like dirt instead of metal that I look back and I can see you further back than I thought you were, like on the side of like the restlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see this other shape like rushing towards you.
Yeah.
Or like rushing towards me probably, but you're in the way of it.
I think it rushes partially towards you, and I do something, like I maybe like jump across the thing, and like you watch kind of the frames of this, of like us, living frames of a skyscraper start to chase after me.
Mm.
And it's past even a moment where we can like lock eyes or have any communication, but you see me lead this thing in a direction, like down one of these natural caves.
Yeah. Do we want to make the roll to see how that goes?
Yes, I think we do. I think this will be our closing roll.
Yeah, and I think the one I'm looking at is hold someone's attention.
Yep.
Which is when you deliberately hold someone's attention, say how you're keeping it, and roll. So how is Grouse feeling in this moment?
Restless.
Mm.
I think it's, I don't think I'm thinking very clearly. I think I'm just, I think it's all panic. It's all panic and focus, right? Like it's all terror.
But like channeled in this way, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's like I just got to keep moving. I'm not bored. Give me my roll. That is an 8. We almost fully succeeded at one of the rolls today.
Yeah, like that's a mixed success. Yeah. So you get to pick one. So you shift their opinion of you. You keep them distracted. They reveal their feelings about something, or they share something useful.
I am going to keep them distracted. I think it is. I am buying you the opportunity to get where you're going. Yeah.
Cool. I think. Oh no. Yeah. Like I realized. And the other part of it is like it's not just you pick one. You both pick one.
Yeah.
So they get to pick one of you, which is interesting. I think you share something useful. I think you share... Is it that you shared, like, the way out? Or something else?
Yeah. I love that. I love that I get out. I love that, like, I mean, I'm really good at this, right? Like, I get out, but there's a really tragic moment where, like, I'm faced with that idea of, like, the heroic sacrifice, and I don't take it.
Yeah.
Like, I could leave this thing underground, have the thing collapse around both of us, and I don't take that. I don't take that opportunity, which means that there will be many more struggles against the Pharaoh to come. But I simply, like, it wasn't what I needed to do today. I couldn't make that call today.
So it ends, like, with you maybe jumping onto this, like, new remnant just further away.
Yeah. And the last thing that we see is you standing in this massive cave looking at this thrashing snowflake figure.
Yeah. And maybe, like, reaching out with, like, one of my hands. Like, maybe it's the smaller hands that do this, actually.
Yeah.
And, like, starting to, like, pull, like, strands of spirit upwards.
Yep.
And, like, the fingers just kind of, twirling it.
I love it. What a good closing visual. And that's game.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh my god, this was amazing!
I had a lot of fun.
Oh, this was good. Oh, I loved this so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, I love playing this game. I mean, I made it, but like I also love playing it, and I think that's also good.
You do not have to justify that statement to me. There's nothing quite like playing the game that you wrote, because we're all writing things for our own amusement.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice when you play with other people who, like, you know, we don't know each other. Like, it's nice when it, like, works and it plays well and, like, everyone has fun. Like, that's always just a good thing.
It was great. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for playing with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and yeah, it's been great.
So, real quick, before we wrap up, where can people find you, your work, and Ryne online?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is, if you've enjoyed, like, listening to Ryne being played, there's, like, an entire season of an actual play podcast called These Flimsy Rituals, that you can find at flimsyrituals.com and on Twitter at flimsyrituals. I'm on Twitter at @tdixon, and if you want to know more about Ryne, you can go to the Furtive Shambles website, or follow us on Twitter at Furtive Shambles. And there's like the play kit is on itch somewhere, and I think the links are on the website to that.
Yep,
And,
they'll be in the show notes.
Yep, and we'll be
Indiegogo
at some point. Which, if you like the sound of the game, like, yeah, we've got some exciting stuff planned for it, and I'm excited to go live with that.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for playing this with me. This was an absolute delight. And for now, I'm going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take it, future me. Thanks, past me, and thanks again to Adam for coming on to the show. That game was amazing. That game was beautiful and cool and evocative and moving, and I'm still beaming about it even after we played it. Like it's incredible. I'm so happy about it. Go to their Indiegogo campaign. Be sure to back the game, help make it a reality. Be sure to download the free play kit at adtidi.itch.io/Ryne and check the show notes for more information about all of that stuff. And be sure to follow Adam on Twitter at adtidixon. Then while you're on Twitter, follow us at Party of One Pod. Like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/PartyOfOnePodcast. Join our Discord community to talk about the show or wrestling or gritty or eggnog at bit.ly/PartyOfOneDiscord. And if you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a nice iTunes review, a Podchaser review, a Podbean review, a Spotify review, a Podcast Addict review. There are a lot of places you can review the show. They all matter. They're all good. Be sure to review the show, give us some love on social media, tell us you like the show, tell a friend you like the show. Any of those things help the show do bigger and better and cooler things, and I deeply appreciate all of them. You can also support the show financially at patreon.com/JeffStormer, ko-fi.com/JeffStormer, or at bit.ly/PartyOfOneMerch, where you can purchase a Party of One logo t-shirt or a bunch of other cool designs. Then, once you've done all of that, if you're like, oh, I really wish I had another podcast to listen to, head over to oneshotpodcast.com, the website of the One Shot Podcast Network, and check out All My Fantasy Children, a character creation, storytelling, and world-building podcast wherein every week, my best friend Aaron Catano-Saez and I take a listener-submitted prompt, we spin it into an original fantasy character, and we populate a shared universe one story at a time. New episodes drop every Friday-ish at oneshotpodcast.com. Party of One is produced and edited, as always, by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. All music for the show comes from the song Infinite Lives by Mega Ran, featuring the D&D Sluggers, and the Party of One logo is by Evan Rowland. If you'd like to inquire about advertising rates coming onto the show as a guest or about press coverage of the show, you can email me at partyofonepodcast@gmail.com. And that is pretty much all we do here, so until next time, thank you so much for listening. Remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. Remember that self-love and self-care are radical and defiant acts of resistance. And as always, party on, everybody.